All right, sorry, interruption. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and assalamualaikum. Thank you so much for registering and participating in one of myHCI-UX event in July. So we are very fortunate, okay, today, this afternoon, that we have Dr. Briane, all the way from Philippines. So Dr. Briane is not someone who is not really someone that we don't know. Quite a number of us already know Briane from our past activities together. I think some of the communities have met Briane in person when we participated in the myHCI chapters meeting, etc. So without further ado, maybe Briane, maybe perhaps you can start with a brief introduction about yourself, and then you can have the floor and start with your presentation. So I really hope everyone here will enjoy the session, and let's welcome Briane. Okay, go for it. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Masita, and thank you to the Kuala Lumpur chapter and the Malaysia HCI chapter for inviting me to share with you some of the things I learned after writing some Kai papers. All right, so let me just ask, should I share my screen now? Okay. All right, so I hope you can see my screen. Okay, so again, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Briane Paul V. Samson from De La Salle University in the Philippines. Today I will be sharing with you my personal experiences in writing Kai papers for the past 3 years. And I hope I could summarize it with some tips that you could try to apply for your own Kai papers, or maybe for this year, or maybe for the coming years. All right, so to introduce myself first. So I am currently an assistant professor of computer science at De La Salle University under the software technology department. And aside from my professorship role, I'm also the co-founder and the current director or head of the Center for Complexity and Emerging Technologies. So that center or laboratory is mainly focused on complex systems research and human-computer interaction research, and merging of those two research fields. Soon I will also take on the role as the research director of the DLSU Data Science Institute. Okay, so in terms of research areas, I'm mainly interested in doing projects related to HCI, broadly defined. Okay, so because we are only very few, there are only very few researchers in the Philippines who work on HCI, so I cannot really specialize in a certain subfield. So I try to work on different kinds of HCI projects. I'm also interested in complex systems research. So when it comes to studying social networks, studying cities, things like that. And then civic media and technology. So this is one field that tries to culminate my HCI and complex systems background, because we try to build tools that could be used by the general public in participating in government, and basically trying to improve how we live in cities, things like that. Okay, so I completed my PhD from Future University Hakodate in Japan. So very recent, just in 2019. So I completed in 2019. So that was the first time that I actually had my first, I was able to focus on human-computer interaction research full-time. Because before that, I was mainly focused on complex systems research. All right, and in Future University Hakodate, I was working closely with Professor Yasu Kusumi. Yeah. All right. So currently, what I work on as a research program is I'm trying to build and design and build a driving navigation application that could encourage drivers to take on unselfish routes. So the main motivation here is the intense and the worsening traffic congestion happening in major cities. And this is one way that I want to introduce a solution for to alleviate traffic congestion. Okay, so these are the different components of my project, which I also started during my PhD, and which I will also be continuing in the coming years. All right, so enough about me. So now let's talk about the CHI conference. So for those who are not familiar with CHI or who will be submitting at CHI for the first time, CHI conference is basically the premier conference in human-computer interaction research. And it's dominated by researchers from Western countries and cultures. And it's great that slowly, okay, other cultures and other communities, niche communities in Asia are slowly gaining attention at the conference because that will make our global community more diverse, so that it's not too focused on the weird population. If you know the acronym weird, so it's white something something. All right, so the CHI conference from the last CHI conference had more than 4,000 attendees because of its virtual nature, and it's expected to continue increasing in the coming years. So last year, there was a total of 15 parallel academic paper tracks. So these are the subcommittees. If you will try to look at the CHI website. So when you submit a paper, you need to identify a subcommittee that you want your paper to be part of. And that is quite crucial in the review process because if you will choose a subcommittee that is not aligned with the paper that you have submitted, then it might have some effect on the kind of reviews that it will get. Okay, so there are 15 of them. So in general, there are a mix of qualitative and quantitative empirical research subcommittees. Some are focused on innovation and actual tangible objects. And then some are more focused on design. Okay. And then just last year, there were 2 additional subcommittees, the critical computing subcommittee and the computational interaction subcommittee. So the critical computing focuses more on applying theories from equity theory, social justice, things like that into HCI research. And then computational interaction is the application of AI approaches to building personalizable technologies, okay, personalized technologies. Okay. All right. So my first dip into the CHI conference and HCI world in general was my submission of this work, so entitled Exploring Factors That Influence Connected Drivers to Not Use or Follow Recommended Optimal Routes. So this is basically an ethnographic study, okay, a qualitative study, wherein I tried to understand how drivers actually use these navigation applications and whether or not they follow what is recommended to them. Okay, so this was the first project that I worked on under my PhD program. So just to breeze through what the paper is all about so that you have a little bit more context when I already share with you the journey, okay, that I went through in publishing this kind of work. So my main research question here is, are the routes being recommended to us always the fastest? And if they are the fastest, do drivers always want the fastest? Okay, or do they always choose the fastest when they want to go to a certain destination? Okay, so what we found out in this work is that no, because 56.9 percent of trips that were recorded in the study still followed the recommended. However, it is not mainly because it could take them faster to their destination, but mainly because it was familiar to them. So that is an indication that drivers do not automatically choose a route because it's fastest, unless they do not really know how to get there. Okay, so these trips are the daily commutes that drivers take. So they are familiar with the route, they know where the destination is, and they know the different alternative routes. Okay. So yeah, and some drivers also share that they intentionally do not follow the recommendations of the application. Even though they use it, they leave it open. They don't necessarily follow it because they don't want to be over reliant on these applications. They want to maintain their autonomy. Okay. And we also look at the different reasons why drivers did not follow what was recommended to them by the navigation application. So in case you are not familiar, these are applications like Google Maps or Waze. So yeah, so they basically give you turn-by-turn voice navigation, voice guidance. Okay, so so after collecting recordings of different trips, we noticed or we observed that they deviated a total of 153 times. Okay, so for at least one trip, there's at least one deviation that happened. And for trips that had more than 5 deviation, it affected their travel time. So their travel time increased by around 14.63 minutes. But this is not yet a significant increase. So we only have 17 drivers in the study. So this is only indicative, okay, that the number of deviations, if you do not follow what was recommended to you, it actually increases your travel time. So this is just an indication. Okay. And for drivers which had 3 to 8 deviations during their trip, they were mostly doing it during urgent trips. So for example, when they want to go to the airport or when they were rushing to an event that they are already late. Okay. And again, these are the different reasons why drivers deviate. So for majority of the reasons, they cited that they did not follow what was recommended to them because they are either impractical or not sensible. Okay, so for example, in this illustration, in this map, the purple line, okay, the purple line is what was recommended by Waze. Okay, the purple line is what was recommended by Waze, and the green line is what was followed by the driver. Okay, so the driver in this case did not follow the recommendation because it's too far. Okay, so it's requiring the driver to go far and then make a U-turn just to make a right turn. So it's not really sensible. Okay, so there are a lot of instances like this in many of the navigation apps that we use these days. Okay, and then these are also other reasons, okay, as well as perceived driving suitability. Okay. So these are just some of the design implications that we came up with. So for this specific research, because it was more ethnographic, okay, the main contribution is really the design implication. Okay, so what did we learn from their experiences, and how can we guide other researchers in building navigation application solutions for the future? Okay, so the first design implication for this work is to make uncertainty visible, because we want the autonomy, because we want the drivers to maintain their autonomy. Okay, we want to be transparent with how sure, okay, the application is in the kind of recommendation that they give. So in this example, the navigation, the one that is shown on the right, the navigation application is telling the driver that this specific road has a heavy traffic congestion because of the red color. Okay. However, when the driver was already driving, okay, just by looking at the road, it's not really congested. The cars, okay, are fast moving. Yes, there were a lot of cars, but they were moving. Okay. So the driver in this case decided not to go straight and instead turned right. Okay. So in this case, the suggestion is to make sure that the decay of this information is also shown in the application. Okay, and then another design implication is to provide real personalization in these applications, because even though these apps are collecting data about you, they're not really recommending routes that are specific to you. Okay. And then maybe the last design implication that I would like to share is to not treat the drivers as docile actors. So drivers are idiosyncratic. They make their own decisions. They're not submissive to an application or to an AI. Okay, so we should respect that. Okay, and treat them as such. So the goal is to guide them into making instructed actions, okay, instead of just telling them turn right, turn right. Okay. So, okay, how was I able to publish this kind of work? Okay, so this was actually maybe almost a 1 year journey. Okay, so I first started by submitting this work to CHI 2018 in their late-breaking work track. Okay, because at that time, I only had data from 7 drivers. Okay, so I knew I could not submit a full paper out of my findings. So when I submitted it for the late-breaking work, okay, even though it was a real work in progress, it was still not successful in getting into that track. So it was rejected. But the reviews were quite constructive. So I used those reviews to refine my research, refine my study design, okay, and tried to include some quantitative analysis. Okay, so that's why I was able to present some of the graphs earlier. Okay, so when I was not accepted to CHI 2018 LBW track, I decided, or my supervisor suggested, that I submit to Asian CHI 2018. At that time, I did not know that such a symposium exists. So it was new to me at that time. So, and because there was only a few days between the results of the LBW track and the deadline of the Asian CHI symposium, I was only able to implement a few, okay, of the changes that I wanted to make, okay, in the Asian CHI paper that I submitted. But fortunately, I was able to get accepted and present my work at CHI 2018, Asian CHI symposium. Okay, so during that symposium, I was able to present as a poster, and I got also feedback from other participants in the symposium. And that was helpful in refining again, okay, my study design, okay, and after the symposium, I tried, okay, to rewrite the paper, and I plan to submit it for Road2CHI 2018 LBW, but because I was not confident that I was able to implement all the right changes, okay, for the LBW paper, I decided not to submit. Okay. So yeah, but I was not entirely disappointed that I was not able to submit for Road2CHI. So I was still happy because I was able to make changes, and I had time to actually think about the changes that I needed to make. Okay, and then after the busy weeks, after attending the symposium, okay, in CHI 2018, okay, I went back to continuing my research, and interviewed and collected data from more participants. So from 7, I was able to add 10. And then after that, I already reached some saturation. So I stopped at 17 people. And then around June, July, August. June, July, August, I was just processing data. And then at the same time, I was writing my introduction and my review of related literature. And the main reason why I focused first on those two parts is because those are the weakest sections of my current paper. I don't have a strong motivation and justification for my work. So I work on that. Okay. And then while I was writing that paper, I also presented my current work at the SIG-UBI study group in Hakodate. And then after all of those small presentations, okay, I finally got accepted to CHI 2019 with very minor revisions in my work. All right, so what was the key takeaway from this first experience in writing my CHI paper? So the first one is to really finish your studies early and to give yourself enough time to write. A lot of us might be ano ba to? A lot of us might be forced, okay, to submit to CHI because of some reason that might help us get promoted or advance in our current roles. But submitting to CHI really requires a lot of time, and you're really living up to chance if you just complete a study for maybe 1 or 2 months and hope that you will have a good paper at the end. So I guess one benefit that I had for this specific paper was I was able to work on it for a very long time, and I was able to spend around 2 to 3 months just writing and refining and polishing that paper. Okay. And then my second takeaway is that you will never get it right on the first time, even though you feel like it's already good enough for your paper. So my suggestion to everyone is to iterate smart. Don't just rewrite for the sake of rewriting. Really think about the kind of changes that you want to make. How does it actually add value to the paper that you are writing? And then my third takeaway for that paper is to maximize the workshop presentations. Okay. And yeah, so for that specific paper, I presented it to different workshops before it got accepted to CHI 2019. So I presented it as in the symposium. I also presented it in the SIG-UBI study group. Okay, so and because of those presentations, I was able to refine the way that I tried to present my work. So yeah. And then, but don't just end with workshop presentations, because sometimes we get contented already by having a workshop paper submitted and accepted. Okay. If you really value the kind of work that you do, it's always best that it ends up either in a journal or in a conference proceeding in full. Okay. Because even though our workshop proceedings are there, they can be cited, they're not always polished work. So other researchers might not always take your findings seriously. All right. So after my CHI 2018 paper, I actually got another paper accepted, but as an LBW this time around in CHI 2019. So it was for a follow-up study that I worked on. Okay. And then after the CHI 2019 LBW paper, so now I'm slowly working with students because I'm already finishing my PhD. So it's a slightly different workflow that I had compared to the first paper. So the first paper, I had full control of my workflow. But for this third paper, I was working with undergraduate students, and I was only part of the team as a mentor. Okay, so the title of the paper is Using Boolean Satisfiability Solvers to Help Reduce Cognitive Load and Improve Decision Making when Creating Common Academic Schedules. So basically, these are your students who are making schedules for the upcoming semester. So when they try to enroll, they try to come up with their test schedule. What courses to take, what sections to take, what times of day do they want to study. Yeah, so that's the main context, okay, of the research. So student scheduling. So it's very close to my role, because we're teachers, right? So it's very close to that one. It's not very far off. Okay. And then, so basically this is the background of the research. Students do not only make schedules for themselves. Sometimes they also make schedule with other people. For example, group of friends, or group of friends, or maybe a study group. Okay. So they want to have their schedules aligned with each other. Okay, so the main goal for this one is to reduce mental stress, reduce cognitive load, and improve their decision making. Okay, which schedule to choose. Okay, and then these are just some of the literature that we looked into. Okay, and we ended up with a constraint satisfiability solver solution. Okay, so there. Actually, for this research, it wasn't originally an HCI paper. Okay, so when I joined the team, they already had built, okay, the tool, the system, but it wasn't really, the research was not really framed as an HCI research. Yes, they did their usability studies, things like that, but it's more of a UX project rather than an HCI research. So when I joined the team, and when they said that they wanted to publish for Kai, what I did was I tried to reframe, okay, the kind of research questions that they wanted. So instead of just building a schedule maker, a scheduling tool, okay, I actually help these students. Okay, so why do we really need to help these students with a scheduling tool? What are we trying to improve with their experience? Because at that time, they were just building something for the sake of building it. It wasn't really clear what they wanted to evaluate at the end. Okay, so for that one, I helped them realize that they're really using the SAT solver-based system to help in the decision-making process and to reduce the cognitive load of the students. Okay, so this is the overall overview of the methodology. Okay, so I also helped them refine the study design at the end. Okay, so for the experiments, the experiments here. Okay. So yeah, so these are the design goals of the system: improve efficiency, reduce stress, minimize mental load. So I helped the student group actually frame their research this way, because at the beginning they did not have these concepts in place. Okay. And this is the final output. Okay. And this is the experiment design that they had at the end. So I also helped them design this experiment design so that it could be submitted for Kai. Okay. So yes, and then these are the different measurements, okay, that they had for this specific study. So for stress, cognitive load, decision making, and overall user experience. So all of them are survey questions, and they came up with an online tool to actually get all of the answers for this one. Okay, and then these are the results that they came up with. So basically, using a Boolean satisfiability solver, okay, they were able to reduce the difficulty of coming up with an academic schedule. They were also able to reduce the overall effort using the NASA TLX tool. And yeah, they were also able to make schedules faster, okay, because they were assisted, okay, by the tool. And yeah, and then these are the different design recommendations. Okay. For this specific paper, what I wanted to share is the workflow that we had for writing the CHI paper, because I was working with undergraduate students. These are not even graduate students. So they don't really have a strong background in writing academic papers. So I needed to find a way, an easy way for them to come up with a narrative that would fit, okay, and that would be a good CHI paper. Okay, so I would like to share the tool that we used. Okay, hold on. Or lag a bit.
I think we are losing Brian. Hope he can come back. Oh, I think he's still there. Okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, I think my internet connection died.
Okay, no worries. Okay.
Okay.
Resume? Yeah.
All right. So I'll share again my screen.
Sure.
This would be the last part of my talk. So, all right. So, okay. So what I wanted to share for the last paper is how we actually, the tool that we were using to come up with the narrative. So this is something that I actually learned from Tamara Mansner. She's a visualization researcher from UBC, or University of British Columbia in Canada. And when I was reading her website, I found there like a page or a document where she lists down her like she suggests a certain workflow for her students. And after reading that, I kind of wanted to apply it in my own workflow as well. So when we were writing the paper for CHI 2021, we were actually using slides, Google Slides for that one. But how exactly did we use it? When we write paper, for example, we write it in Google Doc or maybe in Microsoft Word, or maybe go straight into Overleaf. Okay. Writing papers in those tools can be quite rigid because you really have to look at them in a sequential manner. And if you want to move around paragraphs or sections, it's kind of difficult, right? But with Google Slides, what I realized, after reading Tamara Mansner's workflow is that it's easier to move around sections or parts of your narrative when you do it in Google Slides. So what we did here is for the paper, we had a dedicated slide for each part of the paper, basically, that we wanted to write. Okay, so for example, in slide 3, okay, what do we want to discuss as part of the introduction? And what are the papers that actually help us build this paragraph? So basically here on the introduction on the left, this is the text that we wanted to write. And these are the papers and specific phrases or paragraphs from those papers that we wanted to include here. Okay, so this is for one part of the introduction, and then we wrote here, okay, for this specific paragraph, we wanted to talk about the scheduling context. Okay, and then for slide number 4, still on the scheduling context, okay, but this time we wanted to use papers that talk about cognitive load in decision making. Okay, so in this specific paragraph, we wanted to discuss, okay, after talking about academic scheduling, okay, what then are the overall experiences of people when they try to make schedules? So we wanted to talk about how much cognitive load they experience, especially when deciding which version of the schedule they want to follow in the end. Okay, and then the next section, okay, is the next slide is actually a continuation of the cognitive load in scheduling. Okay, but this time around, we wanted to connect it slowly to Boolean satisfiability solvers. Okay, so that was our intended flow. Okay, and we in Google Slide, what's nice is you can just make multiple copies and then play around and then hide or move to the end some slides that you do not want to use anymore. Okay, and it's quite flexible because, for example, if you think that this paragraph would work well as a second paragraph, you can just move it around. And you cannot easily do this in, for example, in Microsoft. Well, you can copy and paste and then move it, right? But yeah, I guess Google Slide is a more flexible tool when we were when we were coming up with the narrative. So this is how we were doing it. And then at the same time, for the results, okay, so we had the research question. So what do we want to write here? Okay, and then the methodology, we came up with the diagrams also in the slide. And then basically we're using Google Slide to come up with not necessarily the actual paragraph that we want to add in the paper, but more of what specific details do we want to include in that paragraph so that we could write it later. Okay, so that was our strategy. We were using Google Slides, and then in another paper, I also used Google Slides to actually organize how I want to present it later on. So this is actually for the LBW paper that got accepted for CHI 2020. So for this one, okay, so this is the main RQ. This is the first sub RQ. Okay, so what is the impact of having two agents? And then what are the different results that try to answer this specific research question? So here, in the succeeding slides, I was just dumping diagrams from my analysis. So I dumped my analysis here, and then from here, I tried to think of, okay, so what are these diagrams trying to tell us? What kind of insight, okay, can I get from these two diagrams? And then what could be, okay, a paragraph, okay, or a set of sentences that would describe the insight that I saw. And then I also used titles or labels in the slide to actually summarize, okay, the main or the key finding for these two diagrams. So that's how I used Google Slides. Okay, so here I was writing down, okay, so based on these slides, the drivers in the regular day scenario were more attracted, the drivers in the in-hurry scenario, so on and so on. Okay, and then when I did a statistical test, I also put it here. So by the time that I'm going to write the paper, I can just pull sentences that I have already written here. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be something that I will use immediately, but at least I was able to write it down, okay, here. And I was able to group together based on the kind of finding that I want. And then when I now try to think of the narrative, does it make sense for me to present it in this order? Or maybe I could present this one first, right? So that's how I used Google Slides when coming up with the narrative for my papers. Okay, so it's kind of like a notebook, okay, wherein you add slides maybe for each section or for each paragraph that you want to write. And then, yeah. So I was writing here first. And then once I'm already happy with the narrative and what I wanted to talk about in each slide, that's the time when I moved to Overleaf and started putting them together. Okay. So yeah, so this is the workflow that we had for the last two papers that I wrote. So yeah, so for example, if you don't want to write on the slide exactly, you can write your paragraphs in the notes area. So yeah, so this is how I work with the students. So using this tool, so that when we meet again, we're not really looking at a document. I'm commenting on the flow that they want to have and the key idea or key finding that they want to discuss for each slide, because it's easier for them to write it later. Yeah. And basically, that is everything that I want to share. I don't know if those are useful, but yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Basically, distilling or summarizing to you what I learned and what I used in order to get 3 papers accepted to CHI. But I wouldn't necessarily call myself an expert already in getting papers into CHI. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Briane. Although you call yourself not as an expert yet, but I'm sure you are very experienced with your during your student days, even until now. To me personally, I find it very inspiring because I usually listen from the perspective of the researcher as a research student try to submit paper to CHI, but having listened to what you just shared just now, it's also not impossible to actually write for CHI based on the undergraduate projects. So
Yes.
yeah, so I'm very happy to hear that, and I cannot wait to replicate
Yeah.
the work that you do with our own students.
Actually, I would consider that one as my proudest moment, because at that time, I also thought it was impossible to submit a CHI paper from an undergraduate thesis
very
with students.
inspiring. Okay, there's one participant with her hand raised up. Dr.
Juliana.
Juliana, yeah, go ahead. You may unmute yourself.
Hi, hello everyone.
Hi.
Hi, Briane.
Hi, Juliana.
It's very inspiring story. And very, I think it's an achievement to basically collaborate with undergraduate students. So I don't know whether it's in your institution, we can choose the undergraduate students, number one. And number two, I've seen that your presentation looks nice, especially on the box plot and also the, the graph. So what tool that you use? If you may want to share, Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. So for, I guess for the first question, yes, we are able to select the students that we work with. For that specific group, they are already part of the lab, but they were not directly working with me at the beginning of their research. So when they express their intention, Kai, that's the time when I, and that was like in the middle of the research already. So that's why I was still able to help them with their experiment design. At the beginning, they weren't really planning to do any experiments. They were just really planning to do usability tests, like in a normal UX fashion, right? So we just run some usability tests, and then that's the end of it. But because we wanted to get into Kai, we really need to have a story and a research question behind it. And then for the second question, I was actually using, so the students were using Python. The students were using Python, but in the other one, in the other Google slide for my LBW, I was using R. So it was a mix of, so for Python, it was Matplotlib. For R, it was ggplot. ggplot. So I'm actually more familiar now with R rather than Python. So when I work with students, they use typically Python. But if I'm working alone, I just use R because R makes pretty visualizations, prettier visualizations. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Thank you,
Yeah,
Brian.
thank you, Brian.
And thank you, Juliana.
There's one question in the chat screen. I'm not sure whether this is the same question, but the question is, may I know the tool that you use to draw that nice bubble chart? This is from Sharul Nizam.
Yeah, so I think it's the same answer. I was using the bubble chart earlier, was using ggplot
ggplot
in R.
Okay, all right.
And I would also like to share another tip that I was using in writing the papers is, of course, I'm not really familiar with all of the ways that you could write a Kai paper. So the first thing that I usually do is I try to find a best paper in previous Kais. I try to find a best paper that is similar to the kind of methodology and the kind of contribution that I have or that I intend to publish. And I use that best paper as my reference. How did they organize everything in their paper? How do they present it? Something like that. So for my first Kai paper, in Kai 2019, I actually based the way I wrote that paper in one best paper that also did an ethnography and had a design implication section. So I based my writing style based on how they wrote it. And then for the last Kai paper that we had, we also based it on another best paper. So I always use a best paper as a benchmark so that I know that even though I cannot reach the same level as that best paper, it's still close enough. I will not end far from a good quality one. So yeah, so that's another tip that I want to share because I know for a lot of beginning researchers, junior researchers, they don't really know how to approach, how to write a Kai paper for a specific contribution.
All right, that's nice tips, Brian. There is one more question by Liana Jamali. The question is, just wondering, is it necessary to have a result to publish in Kai? What if it is only a preliminary result? Is it still acceptable?
So preliminary results are considered, you can still publish in Kai, but in the LBW track, the late breaking work. So the late breaking work are usually shorter in number of papers. But even though your work is still work in progress, it's still a preliminary result, there should still be a strong contribution there. So reviewers, because I'm also reviewing, and I'm also I'm also an AC for last year and for this the next one. What we usually look for in LBW papers is there's still a strong, even though it's a small contribution, it's a strong contribution. So we cannot just send any preliminary result. So something like that.
So when you said the word strong, it means something that is significant.
Yes. Something that other researchers can already build on, and not something that is still tentative. So some examples of that would be prototypes. Sometimes building a prototype is already a strong contribution, because that prototype can serve as basis of other full papers later on. But if it's going to be a result of an experiment, of course, they will still look at, okay, how significant is your experimental result? How many participants did you have in that experiment? And then we still look at the generalizability, basically, of the result. So even though it's preliminary, it should still be good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So while waiting for more questions, I actually have a few questions to you, Briane. So when you work together with your undergraduate students,
Yes.
how long did it take you and your team
Okay.
to get
So,
yeah.
Yes. So for that one, we started working on the narrative for the paper around June, because I cannot control the time of my students. We really had to start early. So around June, July, and then August. And it's at least for our school, it's also a good timing, because that's also the time when they were finishing their when they were about to submit. So it's still aligned with their actual academic schedule. So they're about to finish to graduate, and we're just inserting there some meetings to talk about, okay, but how do we prepare this for Kai? So it's two birds with one stone. We were working on the narrative, and they eventually used the same narrative for their final document. So yeah.
Okay, that's nice. Another question was perhaps it's not really a question, it's more like a request. So maybe perhaps you can also share with us the website that you stumble upon regarding
Right.
the methodology. Was it the approach that you adopted? I think it's very nice. Just knowing about that is very nice, so that because mentally when we talk about writing for Kai, it's like something that is, something that is so prestigious, and the burden is like, like that.
Right.
When you mention about that is a simpler approach to do it, somehow it just like taking the burden off the shoulder.
Yes.
So it's very nice to know. Right. Let me just scroll through and if there's any more questions.
I can share. I found it. I just found it.
Please go ahead.
So when I was starting my PhD program, of course, I was soul searching. Okay, who are the researchers that I could try to copy?
Okay.
In terms of workflow, things like that. So I was looking for different people, reading through their website, and if they have some information about, okay, how do they work with students, how do they come up with their own topics, how do they write papers, things like that. So in Tamara Mansner's page, so she's from UBC in Canada. So if you go to this part, so here, she has a prospective students section in her website, and she wrote a page wherein she lists down all of the different policies that she have. Okay, so that the student, when they join the group, when they join her, they already know the expectations, right? So they know that when we want to write, for example, a VIS paper, because she's a visualization researcher. If you want to publish in this, that's your decision. If you decide to publish, then you should present where is it? Research logs. Actually, here she distills a lot of wisdom in how she handles her student. So if you want to go through some of the policies that she has, maybe this is also something that you can apply in your own workflows.
Yeah.
I can't find the specific part, but
no worries.
This is where I read that when a student of hers wants to submit a paper, they usually start with slides, preparing a slide. And then during meetings, they will use the slides to actually talk about, okay, so this is the result that you have. How do you want to present it in the paper? Things like that. And then it's easy for them to move around stuff if they feel like the narrative is not too good yet.
Yeah, because it's often that we get the paper done and then change and then get the text and put it in the PowerPoint slides. So this is the other way around. So I think it's clearer in some sense.
Here, before you start the writing phase of a paper, here, this is where she said it.
Pre-paper talk.
You will give a pre-paper talk. So this is where the student will share with the rest of the lab, okay, this is basically how I want to write the results or the contribution of my work.
Yeah.
So she wrote down, she won't start writing until we're happy with the pre-paper talk. So the slides, which becomes basically the outline of your paper eventually.
Yes, that's nice.
So this approach helps distill critical bits, even though it's not yet a real paper. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. Oops. So yeah, we are actually nearly 3 o'clock. So far, we don't have any more questions. Someone requested for the link, but we already put it in the chat. Okay, one more question from Norris. Out of curiosity, what are the reviews from the reviewers like? Are they quite harsh? Yeah.
Yes. I guess it depends on the reviewer as well and the subcommittee where you submit. There are some subcommittees that are quite strict. And there are also some subcommittees that are more constructive than other subcommittees. So it depends. So yeah, but in general, reviewers are ACs and subcommittee chairs share some reviewing guidelines to external reviewers and ACs so that they know how to write the reviews. Yeah, but yeah, I guess it depends on how you perceive the review. Yeah, my suggestion is to read a review after you have eaten something so that you're not too grumpy and you will not be mad after reading the review. Yeah.
Yes, that you're totally right, because it can be very demotivating.
Yeah, because in our time, the reviews arrive in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Right? So once you wake up, you will see an email about the decision of your paper. So what I usually do and what we usually do in the lab is we don't read it first. We eat breakfast first, and then that's the time when we read the review.
Yeah, it affects you the whole day, wasn't it?
Yes. Because you'll end up depressed the whole day.
Yeah. So we don't want that. So another good tip from Brian.
Yes. SLR. Sorry, what's an SLR?
That is another question. SLR is systematic literature review.
So yes, it's acceptable.
Yeah, it's acceptable. Yeah, in Kai. Yeah.
As long as it's a good quality systematic literature review. And it's not something. It's something that was not done before.
But from my observation, SLR, we don't often see in
Yes.
CHI, but once those kind of papers got accepted, they are very, very good kind of review.
Yes.
So the
Yeah.
standard is quite high as well. So I think I would follow your suggestion. Maybe look up for the best papers that has published along the line of paper reviews, and then perhaps make it as our anchor paper. So
Yeah, actually, there's one recent in 2019 or 2018, I think. There's this paper by Frederick Brody, which is more on multi. Because he works in multi-device collaboration. So when you have a phone, when you have a tablet, when you have a computer, how do you pass around information? How do you connect all of those devices and enable collaboration? He has a good paper that does a systematic literature review, but he did not end by just doing a literature review. He actually came up with like a framework of that specific field. So that I believe that's a stronger paper for Kai rather than just reading the papers and then summarizing them in some way. So it's more of what's the next step after summarizing all of these papers? What could be a more useful product after you've summarized them? So they came up with a diagram that like they presented a taxonomy basically for multi-device collaboration, something like that.
yeah.
So yeah, so Frederick Brody is one person that I could think of. And then of course there are also papers on yeah, this one, cross-device taxonomy. This is the paper I was talking about. So it's also a systematic literature review, but they came up with a taxonomy in the end. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for your feedback, Brian. Do you have any more? So far, we do not. Okay. So thank you so much once again, Brian, for spending about an hour with us this afternoon. Right. So for the participants, there is a link for you guys to fill up the feedback for this session. We would love to hear your feedback. Before we leave, I would like to make a few announcements, and then perhaps we can make take a group photo. Okay, so let me just quickly make an announcement. I would like to also share. Hang on, 2 screens. Okay. Number one is regarding Kai. So Kai 2022 will be happening in New Orleans, LA, Los Angeles. Yeah. Okay, I'm not too familiar with the with the US landscape. Anyhow, if everything is going okay, it will be a physical conference, if not mistaken. But we are still waiting for latest announcement from them. Regarding the paper types for Kai 2022, so if you look at the author page, so there are quite a number of different paper categories. So the one that Brian mentioned just now was a late breaking work. So if you are a student still have ongoing research or ongoing studies, so you may want to try to write for late breaking work category, or you may also, let's say, already towards the end of your study, you may want to try to go for paper, full paper writing. Brian, can you just clarify regarding the work that you did with the undergraduate students? Is it LBW or full paper?
It's a full paper.
Ah, nice. Okay,
Yes.
so it is possible.
Yes, it is possible. Very much possible. They just need a lot of guidance from the faculty member,
Right.
because they don't really know how to approach or to frame their work.
Okay, that's very nice, and it's very inspiring and encouraging at the same time. So yeah, so all of you may try to look at the website for Kai 2022. I hope the deadline is still not too soon. I'm not too sure when is the deadline though.
It's maybe around last week or third week of September for the abstracts.
2 months from now,
Yeah.
for the abstract. Okay, all right. so we still have time.
But for 2022, it's going to be a revise and resubmit. Right?
Revise and resubmit. So
it's a different flow from last year.
Okay, how significant is the difference? Is it like
you will have more, instead of sending a rebuttal wherein you describe the changes that you want to make, you will be given more time to actually revise your paper and then resubmit it. So there will be, it's going to be more work on our part for ACs, but yeah, it's also beneficial to authors because you also get to do the changes immediately.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you for the heads up, Brian. Okay, just a few more announcements. So basically, yes, please, we would like to ask the audience or the participants for this workshop to fill out the feedback. I already pasted the link in the chat. And we also actually have t-shirts, okay? So you may, I will also put this in the chat, okay? If you like to, hang on, where's my chat go? So it's gone. Where is it? Okay, hang on. I would like to put up my chat screen. Okay, here, found it. Okay, and then two more announcements. Well, we'll be having Fusion 2021. So Brian, for your information, Fusion is our national symposium where we celebrate our local researchers at the national level. So we'll be having Fusion 2021 on the 19th of August. So this year, this is chaired by Dr. Hanif from UKM. So do wait for more announcement from Dr. Hanif. And last but not least is the fourth AGM, okay, for myHCI-UX will be happening on the day after Fusion, 20th of August. So I will encourage every one of us here to sign up as ACM membership if you like to vote. And if you like to run for office, okay, do also sign up as a SIGCHI membership. Okay, so we are still like a month away, okay, from the AGM. Right, so that's it from me. So now let's take a group picture. Okay, hang on, let me just put everyone in gallery. Okay, right, are we all ready? Okay, you guys may turn on your camera. You can also say hi to Brian. Okay, you can turn on your mic. Okay, which parts of Philippines are you at, Brian? Because they can hear the chicken.
Oh yeah, I'm in Makati, but my neighbors really have chickens that they use for cockfighting. they breed chickens for cockfighting. So
I see. Oh, they're real.
Yeah, my students are well aware of the chickens.
Okay, that's nice. All right, so we have two screens here. Okay, let's get ready, everyone. I will take this screenshot now. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and the second screen. Do maintain your smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, hang on. Okay, nice one. Okay, so thank you so much once again, Brian. So I really hope that this short session really inspire each one of us, okay, to write for CHI, because most of the time we felt like it's impossible to get it published there.
Yeah.
So I still do sometimes have that kind of anxiety, but having listened to what you just shared is something that I think we could take up and try to replicate what you have done with your students especially. So thank you so much once again. And that's it, everyone, for today. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Take care and stay safe.
Yes.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.